Alright, guys. We're back. We gotta jump right into this. Okay? We're just gonna have to power our way through this. The last stream took way too long. It was like 30-40 minutes just for the... I didn't even finish. Okay, so I'm actually, I drank too much really strong coffee. Aside from being a little bit nervous of being on camera, I guess. My hands are sweating really badly. I'm really wired on the coffee, so I'm not sure why it was so strong, but I do like a lot of sugar in my coffee. Anyway, we gotta get going on this. You want to learn C++, right? You want to make your own games. You want to make your own game engine. You don't want to pay Unity. You don't want to pay Unreal, but you want an engine that can maybe stand a chance at someday comparing to Unreal. You're in the right place. I've been doing this my entire life. I've been involved in C++ for, I wouldn't say 15 years. I'd say maybe 5 out of the 15 that I started. I took a little hiatus for about 10 years and raised kids, but I'm back, and I've been hard at work all year since early spring. Probably since May or the middle of April, I've been writing libraries all summer to build up to the core of a game engine. We haven't quite got to a game engine yet, but confident we can get that last step, and I wanted to do that live. And teach everybody that doesn't know C++, C++. I'm not sure why we're not going live this time. Let me check. Just make sure. We're in the shorts feed again. I changed a couple of settings.
Today at 5:30 a.m.
Yeah, that dumb AI video I did just for demonstrations.
Today at 5:30 a.m.
It's annoying now. Oh, we're live. Yeah, that looks like the shorts feed to me. And it says there's 2 people here, but on my... Huh. It might be because I reused the stream. Or it could be because you guys are viewing somehow, or you're some special people, or it's just not counting your views. But wow, there's 18 on here, but there's... Why am I not getting any good stats here? Doesn't matter. Anyway. Okay, let's get after this. Because I never even finished my Hello World tutorial, and that's just sad, really. And we're taking too much time again. Hang on, let me see if I can... Yeah, I have to close that one, I guess. Let's see what happens when I show this. Is it even going to show that? Probably not, because it's the... What is that called? Oh, okay. So to even show it. Got it. Okay. So this is what it looks like when you use Visual Studio. You might be in it already and not at this view. What is this called exactly? If you want to get to this view, or if you're in it already, Actually, if you're in it already, you need to close it, and you need to get to this view, which is to just run it from the start menu, or the desktop, or the task view, or wherever. You'll get to this view. You're going to create a new project. You're going to create a Windows console, or in right here it says run code in a Windows terminal, prints hello world by default. So I've already gotten you this far to understand what the basic console application in Visual Studio is, or for C++, or C for that matter. Because this, actually, I don't know if this will work in C, but you know it will. That will. IOStream probably just points to CSTDIO, and that would be the C standard in out, as opposed to IOStream, which handles FStream and all the newer C++. I think it was C++ 11 or 14 that they made this standard, or something like that. Anyway, we'll get back to C in a minute. I mean, it pretty much explains everything. You're going to want to read this to understand how to operate all of Visual Studio. Let me see if it... Is it showing? Oh, what the heck? It's not even showing yet. What went wrong here? Oh, wait. What in the heck? It's not even giving me an option now. Let me see if I transition. There we go. So, I actually left one part out, and I don't know why it's not in... They must have removed that, because you used to require this, and now I believe what they've done is they've made it so that if it doesn't exist, it just finds... It handles it much more correctly. The terminology for that is hard to find. But anyway, normally it would return 0, and that is because the int main function is an integer function. What does that mean? Okay, well, we know how to print things like a string, and you can extrapolate from there that there are other functions you can use strings in, and put it in GUI or UX, which would be graphical user interface, or user experience, which is it's Windows. It's all the GUI. It's all the... We know what GUI is, right? Everybody knows what GUI is. If you don't know what GUI is, go learn what GUI is, and then come and write a game engine. But I actually started with GUI and Earlicht engine, and so this kind of... I don't know, maybe that's why it's so fundamental to me, because I just kind of started with the things that were fundamental. But so what on earth am I talking about? Well, there's something else other than functions. There's variables in C++. Okay, now we're talking variables. What is all this nonsense? Well, if you know any other programming, you're probably pretty familiar with these. If you're not familiar with programming, these are the basic numbers, the mathematics that you work with. They're called variables because these are the variable problems or the variable conditions or the variable starting conditions of your mathematical formula, your code, your binary. In Visual Studio, you'll notice it says solution right here. That's because the program is basically a logical mathematical solution. It's essentially, from the other stream, somebody said formulas. Oh good, my stats are working finally. Somebody from the other stream I did there said formulas, and that's pretty correct. It's basically one giant mathematical formula in a encoded written form. That's where the code part kind of comes in, because all code kind of goes back to math. In fact, it goes back to assembly, and it goes to binary. And it's processed through the CPU and RAM and such as binary. And it's viewed as hexadecimal for human reading format. So, integer is whole numbers. And there's also something else you got to do, just which is to initialize everything. Because what does x equal? Right? Well, in C++, it starts to count every time you create an x. So x could equal just about anything. In fact, different operating systems might just associate x with something else, or they might associate integer with something else, or whatever. But when you say int x equals 0, you're almost all the way there to protecting yourself from any of that. The only problem there is the int, but you can fix that as well. We'll get to that. That's types. Variables, conditions, types, methods, functions, and objects, and maybe loops are basically all that make up of almost all programming. So let's try to get back on track here and keep it simple for the nooblets. And I don't mean that in a bad way. If you're a noob to C++, you're already an empowered individual. A lot of people can't hack it. This takes a very meticulous type of person to, not to enjoy, but to get deeply involved with and do correctly without mistakes, because mistakes basically equal death. Back a long time ago, I basically started coding procedurally and functionally because it was the simplest to understand for me, and it was the only time that my code would work. Anytime I tried to use object-oriented programming, what I would end up with is attempting to use either the friend class or the friend operator or whatever, or I would nest it in such a way or inherit it in such a way that would fail. Anyway, back to variables. You've got integers, you've got booleans, which are either 0 or 1. Strings we already talked about. Embarrassing. Okay. So, and then float, which is floating point integers. That's integers with a remainder. And the F, don't ask me why they need an F, but it does signify to the component that is a float. Probably because there's an operator that uses this, and numbers are interpreted differently when it's just solid numbers versus letters. That's why this whole arrangement even works without initiating other commands. within C++. I forgot the whole purpose, like the overlying theme I was getting at. But anyway, we're moving along here. So, oh yes, now I remember. It's right here. So why is a function a whole number? Well, that's because C++ handles functions and their, I guess, type or their variable type differently. For example, you can actually do that and it doesn't need to return. This one actually cannot overload functions distinguished by a return type alone. I'm not even overloading it. What is it talking about? Hang on. Oh, this is an overload. Oh, okay. Yeah. Can't overload it based on the return. It's just because it's probably detecting two mains. Like I said, you can't do that. But anyway, I wanted to include the part where, because that's really the final part of this tutorial. It's not necessarily in VS, but if you were to try to run that on GCC on Linux, you'd quickly find that you need the return 0, and it could take a while to find that issue if I didn't mention it, so that's very important. But apparently the Windows either compiler, probably better, versus the, well, it could be in the runtime, which is when your program runs, it runs within an environment of other code. I'm not sure where they have that, but I know that return 0 is more than likely still required on G++. Let's see. I feel like taking a break because the coffee is getting to me. Be careful with your coffee. Coders, that's a warning to you. Be careful with your coffee, and you pretty much, you're going to need that. You'll find out very quickly why. I struggled for a long time. Like I said, I kind of did it for, off and on for 5 years. And I've been doing it for 6 months this year, and maybe some last year, just tinkering around a bit. But it's kind of hard to stick with, especially C++. It's a difficult language because there's a lot of things that you still have to do manually, but it's not nearly as bad as C or other languages where you pretty much have to do everything manually, and it's more difficult to do because it requires more code to get to the same thing as it does in modern C++. But there's a couple of things about what's coming in C++ that's going to make this whole development better. And even though, like C# and other abstractions, cross-platform code abstractions, have gotten better with the hitching, so Unity does run a little better, a little. Aside from C#, which this probably will end up having for scripting, there's not a ton of cross-platform languages. And there's not a ton of reason to make cross-platform games either, except for the fact that it's fairly simple to do. Why wouldn't you? You never know when Windows might start charging again, and we all end up on Linux, right? So we're going to want our games programmed for Linux as well, and Mac and whatever. And there's probably a fair market on Mac. Regardless of the money you might make, you don't want to exclude people if you can help it. And as a coder, it's kind of fun. So And you're going to find out because we're going to do some cross-platform coding. I've got a whole Linux VM set up for that. Which is kind of what led me to want to really do this stream, because if I got to do all that and it's kind of cool and fun, then why not stream it all? And there's just a lack of this sort of thing on the internet, and a lot of misinformation out there. Maybe not really bad information necessarily, but I don't know. I just set the record straight, and I'm here and I'm doing it, and I got this streamer pole and all this stuff that I don't have to use for anything else. So here we are. Anyway, back to the code. I told you that was going to be the most concise stream there was. There's a bit of history to go here, and we're just learning it as we go. If you're going to be doing coding, you're going to be wasting a lot of time anyway. Maybe not wasting, but it's going to require a ton of time. I think my dog might be getting into stuff, so hang on, I'm going to go on break for a second and check on the dog. Okay, well, let's get back at this. All right, variable types. Integers can only be whole numbers. They cannot be like a floating point value. They cannot have a decimal place. If they have a remainder, it is truncated. Gone. So you can, however, get a modulus from a couple of integers, and there are ways of getting the integer directly in the process of division or whatever, subtraction, etc. So, but you know, anytime you divide, anyway, the Boolean, like I said, is a true or a false. It's either a 0 or a 1. And in C and C++, actually I don't know about C, but in C++, there are a couple of operations that are defined to equal either 0 or 1, and they are true or false. And that is very important because there are cases where the 0 or 1 either doesn't apply, like, for example, a -1, I believe, equates to a 0. But in some situations, that can actually cause an error. Strings, there's also characters. Characters were used a little bit more. Let's see here. I believe you have to use these. And that may not be an array, but this, how do you do it? This way? either like that or like that. It's not like that. But I don't think you can. Maybe I do have that wrong. I don't know. I don't work with characters that much, or strings for that matter. This is one of those difficult things that kept me back, was trying to figure out all the nuances to this. And in my modern coding, I pretty much only deal with strings because most of the standard template libraries deal with strings that way. So this is not quite as important to learn, or you can learn that kind of on your own. I probably won't be talking about it too much, at least for quite a while. The float, again, are floating point integers, such as, say, maybe a whole number that has some long string of digits, and you'll find that a lot of values that you'll receive from functions, other people's libraries, etc. Like, for example, if you were to use this float, like that. Let's see, that's a float. Okay, two. This might work. Okay. What about this? Oh, that's not what I wanted. What am I doing wrong there? HTTP? Now, here's a good chance. Visual Studio has a really handy thing. And this is something I don't know how to do in VS Code, which is one of the reasons I don't care for it. Because, again, originally when I started messing with VS Code, it didn't have even IntelliSense working. I think that might be fairly recent. I know this is, isn't it? What is going on here? Let me think this through. I thought for certain that worked. I mean, I know you need... This is what I was talking about. Autocode. And then I can add just... all I did was press the greater than or less than, this first one right here. And it automatically creates this one. It does the same thing with parentheses in Visual Studio. So then all I have to type is string. It normally would give me IntelliSense here too, and it would pop up, and I'll just finish it myself. Let's see if this is working yet. There we go. That should actually work. Here, let's try it. Oh, I'm literally trying to do this on the OBS screen. There you go. It prints hello world. There, we finished our tutorial, right? We even showed how you can not use return 0, or let's go all the way. We'll show it with the return 0, and it works just the same, see? And this is the way that you're supposed to do it. It's kind of shameful. Well, not shameful. I mean, Microsoft are professionals, don't get me wrong. But it does seem odd that they excluded that. But then again, most people understand that by now. And going forward and in some other languages, I don't think it's needed. Let's be honest. Aside from Microsoft changing their payment system or something like that in a future model, we've got for free. You just don't get remote desktop, which by the way, you can use Chrome. They have a remote desktop. Anyway, back to the code. We've got some new stuff in here. You notice how this is on two separate lines. Well, it wouldn't be if it wasn't for this right here. What that does, you see how it's a different color? That's an escape character right there, that slash. And this is the new line indicator. It could actually be R and it would be return. In a console, that looks like... Oops, I don't know if this is going to take over or what it's going to do. I messed this up. Hang on. Okay, so the return apparently, actually I'm not sure why that did that. That's really strange. Normally it would return and would give an extra line because that's what return used to do in the console, but this is also Microsoft Visual Studio debug console, so things work a little differently. Anyway, new line is you should be learning for now. That return is something to play with carefully. This std2 string is one of the newer functions as opposed to what I did before, which was this. Which was a function you used to be able to attach to it. I think, what is the command or the inclusion for that? Is it std? It might be. Oh, let's see what this says. No? Huh, so strange. Sometimes you could do it like this too, I think. Is that actually trying to work? Yeah, it is. Yeah. See? It's not a type name. Y is not a type name. So, that's not actually the way to do it. But anyway. So, I'm sure by now we're starting to confuse anyone who's new. So, let's rewind. First of all, let's get rid of the C header. Second of all, we don't need this float to print, but it was interesting to see. We don't need this because Microsoft doesn't care apparently, which is good. They've removed a redundant piece of code that probably just doesn't do anything in the first place. Hello World is back. So let's just play with this for a second because we can, and just see what that does. That is interesting. I'm not even sure what in the world that is doing. Hello World. Hello World. Wow, what is that doing? They might have changed its functionality. That might not actually be return anymore. Or it might have some special... Or it just doesn't work right in debug console. But anyway, so the way this whole layout works... Let me see what you can see here. You can see the whole layout. Throw this over out of the way. Okay, so this whole layout. These right here, you never want to click this. Just saying. This is the external dependencies. This is each and every file that your project is connected to. And depending on what you have installed as far as APIs, and that's a whole other thing. There's what's called the Visual Studio installer. And the installer can be used, it's not on the thing. I actually make a new task icon on my task tray down. You can't see it right now, but down at the bottom of your screen there is your task menu. And I go and I dig the Visual Studio installer out of there. You right click on it, you send to desktop, then you right click on it, pin to taskbar. And you will get your own Visual Studio installer. Or you can find it somewhere in there. That's what it's called. You'll figure it out. So, there's an update available. See, this is why you need this thing. So then you go in there and you hit modify on your Visual Studio Community 2022. Not the preview. Because you don't want to mess around with beta stuff when you're designing software. Especially since the beta stuff can have crashing and all that. And you'll forget you're using it. So you go to hit modify. Now it's time you need to see. I guess I have to switch the scene just to get it to appear. Okay. So you hit modify. Actually, I didn't want to show that just yet. Okay, here we go. This is the installer. And you hit modify here. Just looking at this. You can import settings. You can get the updates there. But you can modify your installation. And that is how you include, the Windows API is automatically included if you're running on Windows 11. But that's how you include, say, Linux development here. That's how you include games development for C++. You don't actually need all the DirectX Unreal, and I wouldn't get involved in any of that. You definitely don't need the Unity package, but you do need some things in here. And if I click on this, it's going to mess things up. Right here is where it is. And these are what you need. The C++ core features, the universal C runtime, the redistributable update. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to produce anything for Windows Desktop. You're going to want the VC Package Manager out of there. A bunch of other things that may or may not be included. The Windows 11 SDK is probably the primary one. So I was wrong. It's not automatically. Some Windows functions are, but this will have what you need if you were going to use DirectX, for example. You're not going to get DirectX 12 without this. Do I have multiple versions of it? This is probably the latest version plus. Yeah, I don't need that, I don't think. I'm actually modifying that right now. Yeah, so you can see what a modification looks like. It had multiple SDKs, and that can actually cause problems. You only want one SDK. With Windows 11, the way this is set up, you want one SDK only. And you probably want to build with an older SDK like the Windows 10 SDK, but that way it's compatible with Windows 10 too, as well, which is pretty much, it's DirectX 11 and it's, yeah, anyway. Save my work. Oh, yeah, it's got a, yeah. So, just get the Windows 10. It's like 19340 or something, because that one has the most updated stuff and some of the more secure features and things. It's like the second year November fall update, the one where they first started giving it names. But it really doesn't matter what you code with in the beginning. You're not going to get anywhere for years. If you want to understand and get familiar and know every little trick, like even I don't know every trick. Every C++ programmer seems to have their own set of tricks. And we teach each other. That's kind of why I'm here. So And another reason is because I got a few cool tricks I want to show you that even C++ veterans might not know or understand about C++. But it will help you to understand this language to its core. Because you just understand the instruction that the parser is going to take, the compiler is going to take when it reads your code and how it's going to interpret it. And it's just like I said before, line by line by line. It's just where's that line at any given time. When we start to get into the multi-threading, we're going to enter the multiverse, and that you might think we can keep track of it, and we can. You enter the console realm, and it's kind of like looking at quantum mechanics through atomics, where it's just all a mystery. But basically what I'm saying is when you multi-thread a console, it will just insert things so randomly and precisely and quickly that it'll just go in between your formatting, and you'll end up with really long strings randomly and things like that. You've seen it in my FPS examples. Okay, we're not going to get the update right now. That took too long as it is. Looks like this whole thing stopped working because it made me shut Visual Studio down for that. I think it's this one. And then we're going to have to transition to get back to. Close. Not quite. Oh, I don't know where it is. Is that it? It says no. All right. That is a Hello World program. That is what variables are. This may be a good time to shut this stream down because that's 2 videos that took almost an hour just to show variables, the basic variables, which isn't usually in a Hello World tutorial, but we did show the Hello World, and I guess after looking at the Microsoft way, it was right all along. So you never know with code, and that's the way this goes. That brings up a good part of the story, though, the beginning. How it is that I've been doing this for even 5 years, let alone 15 or longer, why I don't have, if I can make my own engine and I can make my own games, I am just getting there, but, and we're going to do it live. And, why? Well, the reason why is because there were complications with the code back then. But like I said about Ehrlicht engine, or however you say that in German, I'm not German. Well, I might be partly German, Dutch or something, but I don't speak German. I don't sprechen Sie Deutsch. Uber, I don't know. See, I don't speak it. So, so how did I get in this mess, so to speak? That is because DirectX 12 was DirectX, the newest DirectX then, and this was like space age stuff to me, was 8 and 9, I believe. And this was 10 years ago, or 13 years ago. And things were done differently. Of course, there's RTX and ray trace rendering now. But also, like, the industry changed, the code changed, I changed, everything changes, And that is the most difficult part of this whole process, is keeping up with the constant change. And one of the hardest things to do is keep up with constant change on things that are complex. But C++ has gotten a lot easier, and I wouldn't even be doing these tutorials and advocating that you learn it if it wasn't for that fact. Because I find that it's so easy now that it might even be easier than my experience was with C# scripting in Unity alone. And we all know, most of us already know, even if we don't know anything about code, if you're here watching me, probably you've used Unity or seen someone use it, or you can go and watch a tutorial real quick and learn how easy that is. But that code seemed more complex than C++ does to me now. And in 1 month and a half, I was able to assemble all the parts of my engine and get a core of a game engine minus the rendering. And maybe a couple of parts. But it's got almost everything, including multi-threading. The multi-threading needs work, but it's all implemented. Most of it is implemented. It's got a job system. It's got a queue system that is better than the other free engine, which is Wicked Engine. And that brings us to Wicked Engine and why I even got involved with making my own engine again. Everybody wants their cut, and sometimes they deserve it. Making games with Unity is a huge advantage to people who want to make small games that are expected to make less than $100,000 a year. Anything above that, and you're basically hiring Unity as your support team, which is fine as well, because quite frankly, hiring and firing people is kind of a pain. It might be worth it. Steam, it might be worth it. No, Steam is definitely worth it. Because it's cornered. I only buy games on Steam. Shame on me. If I saw something indie, I would probably try to support it. If they had a Kickstarter, that'd just be a detraction. I'm not putting anything on I'm not buying anything off Kickstarter. Unless it's just like, I never say never, because, the world is flipped upside down 4 times in my lifetime. So, I am what you call a exillennial or whatever, so I'm one of those. So, most people don't even know what that is. But anyway, I feel like I need to say a little bit more about variables. And we can go back and touch on that subject. I mean, quite frankly, variables drive the code. They are... If you go back to math class, if you go back to 1 plus 1, or better yet, you go back to algebra, and x plus x equals 2. X can only equal 1 or 2. But that's not how code works. You're going to know what x equals most of the time. What you're not going to know what equals are the pointers, and that's complex, but I think I finally have a better grasp on it. And that's the reason why learning this language and doing this is so difficult, because there's not a whole lot to it, but it's a bit complicated, or they are abstract type concepts that can convolute and layer and get complex, and the interweaving of that, it starts procedural, but you start to make it object-oriented and all this, and you end up with this mixed up stack of books, and it gets very complicated, and almost no one can jockey or ride that. The way that I was taught, at least, because I've never been in the industry, is that in the industry they do basically what I do, and they move in really tiny incremental steps, but they abstract that tiny bit of code out and make sure that works kind of in isolation, and then slowly add it, and if it doesn't work, you just revert back to old code, and that's basically how everything works. Baby steps. You're probably going to hear me say that a lot. This isn't that difficult. Becoming used to it, very difficult. Keeping up with it, medium to hard. Being young and absorbing these concepts, easy if you're really involved in it. Difficult if you're not. What else can I say? Hello World programs are the starting point of almost every language. You'll find that a lot of languages are written, if not almost the same. If you don't feel it's that way, I do. If you don't feel it's that way, I can at least say that they share the same concepts and patterns. That the reason you need concepts and patterns is because this stuff doesn't just work out of the box. Any pattern that contains friend code, I mean, you could almost say it's a bad pattern. Is this thing reverbing the whole time? Sorry about that. What else can I say? I'll show you a namespace real quick. Namespaces are used to wrap code. Oh, I need to switch back to... Oops. Now you see, oh, I was trying to show you you see how it automatically, and then I just hit tab. I'll just throw it in a namespace. Now that's a namespace, and you see it's got its own little code environment, its own little scope, and when we put it in there, it automatically tabulates for us. And I might have done this wrong. What am I doing wrong? Using namespace. Oh. Not using. Using is when we want to call into the namespace. So what we would say is, and I can just tab, and then I can say, using a namespace, my main. Actually, I might need to do this. And that acts as a forward, oops. I'm telling lies. Okay. So this allows us to a namespace without declaring one like this. We don't want to put code in it, we just want to be able to use it. So like for example, if I was to then type this, which is to enter, actually is that a pointer? No. If I could run code here, and this wasn't a special function, then this function would pop up right here, just like that. And you could run it without going inside the namespace. There's another way to do it. It's like this. Oh, there we go. So, namespaces help to encapsulate code. They're like rock hunting, and we gotta put a rock somewhere. We put them in a bucket. Namespaces are the bucket. It's just a container. But they actually serve a special purpose, and that is to wrap our code in its own name so that, let's say we were to have a function called update. Now, how many people do you suppose have a function named update? All of them, right? Right. So, you've got to have a special name for all of your functions. Except, that's no fun. So what you can do is many things, but one thing you can do, very simple, the easiest thing you could do, is to wrap it in a namespace. So you wrap all your code in a namespace, just like this. And it should, I'm not sure if that'll fire or not. It should. It doesn't. That's because this might actually work. I'm not sure. It might be the this might actually work. No, it's not gonna work. If I did it as void, it might. Okay, maybe not. But that's only because it's the main function. You can do it with your own code. The main function is special, and we're going to learn all about it. You notice I changed that from integer to void. Now, it actually did give us a warning. I'm not sure what it was because it's gone now, but it does still function correctly. Oh, you can't see the console, can you? All this time you couldn't see the console. Silly me. Actually, I might just add a window for that. Let's see here. This could work. Maybe. Seeing the console though. What's going on with that? What? Let's try again. Oh, it goes away when it goes away too. Oh, what in the... Well, that's pretty fun. Why is it doing that? The rendering? That is strange. Okay, yeah, maybe you just can't capture the console. Well, at least not like that. Let me bring this over here so I can see what I'm working with. This probably should stay on this side anyway so I can pay attention to what I'm showing. This gets complicated because the console has to be open and it shuts down every time. Yeah, then it does this. It's set to the console. I don't know how to get this to render like ooh. Bitplate, let's see. No, that's not gonna work. Oh, here's another one. Oops, what'd I do? Wait, what? Oh, I got them confused somehow. Isn't this working? You'll find yourself saying that all the time while you're programming too. Because you never know why it doesn't work. But that was 15 years ago. Or 13 or whatever. Now, VS has such good IntelliSense, and it works in VS Code now, that a lot of times you can figure out what the problem was. And I've noticed as a programmer, I go further than some people, and that's why I succeed and they don't. I stick with it a little bit longer. I've had that talent my whole life, so it's not surprising. But that's the kind of mentality you have to have and whatnot to do this stuff. I guess I can't show you, but anyway, you saw it earlier, right? Didn't I already add a where is the... I thought I added a desktop here somewhere. Where is it? This one? There we go. Okay. Here we go. you see this? Yeah, hello world, really fancy. So, where were we? We were talking about namespaces, but what was I talking about? I wanted to show you something. Anyway, let me show you these tools while I can here. You go to start it. This will start it. You can debug it this way, and it shuts down too fast, but it gives you a stop button over here. So if you get stuck in a break or a whatever, you need that stop button to actually shut it down. You need to make sure that that's shut down. And there's another thing you need to do. Right here, if you were to build the solution, that's different than building the project. You can also project only, and you also need to clean lots. There's something called object files. And those object files need to be erased. I don't know precisely which files, but whatever files it's deleting, you need to delete. Because if you try to use that with a build that has more than a slight change, you'll notice it doesn't change at all. It just compiles from those files and avoids whatever changes you've made. So that's something that when you're new you need to understand. But so let's say, and then instead of debugging it, we'll just build the project only, not the whole solution, even though it's the same thing right now because there's no more projects. And we got the warning that main should be an int instead of void because Microsoft. The only explanation I even have for that is the fact that it takes integer, I believe. No, it takes characters. It takes integer-like variables as the command line parameters in the function, like this. Something like this. I'm not going to do it right now, but it's something like that. And those are actually characters, which are integer values, which maybe has something to do with that. But anyway, it's just really weird not to return a integer from an integer function. That makes the int main very unique in that regard. And there's also the properties. When you right click on the project and go to the properties, you got to set it for newer versions of C++, otherwise you get 14. In the legacy C, you need to set up your VC package a little bit, not too much. You notice this doesn't have anything. I'm not going to get into linker and includes just yet. There, now I think we've covered pretty much all our bases and got most of the history I wanted to explain so far. Probably take a little break before we do another stream on this. Next we'll probably be going into if statements, which is what I did in the past. Which is where I'm going to show you some interesting things about this whole procedural stack talk. And yes, and then there's also stack and heap. We should probably talk about that soon. So, what am I even displaying right now? Okay. Yes. Hello world, C++. I'm Adam, creator of Almond Core and soon to be the Almond Engine, which we're going to code live as I teach you all to do the same. It's been fun. This is our second video on C++, our second live stream. We're going to be doing more. I'm going to be doing a lot of this until we get there. And you might think it's going to take a long time. You might think that I'm going to make 20 videos like everyone else now. Not really. I mean, yes and no, but we're going to try to get there as fast as we possibly can. I want a direct route to take you from not knowing how to program at all to making plus so that if you don't want to, you want to do the work yourself, you don't have to pay nobody. And I love like header only, very simplistic, well maybe not that simplistic, but definitely clean implementations that are extremely fast for the game engine, and very, very up-to-date code, and full implementations, and no hurdle is too high. And I hope you got the time if you're going to get involved, because it's going to take all of your time. So that is C++. I am Adam Rushford. Happy coding.